The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is September 29, 2024, and once again, as always, like every Sunday or Monday, we are going to review the situation within Ukraine. So, let's start. It's not going to be too long of a video today because there's not a lot to cover, but regardless, there's stuff to cover. So let's get started. First of all, in the direction of Velika Novosilka, the Russians are reportedly on the outskirts of Zolota Niva. Now, initially, a week or two ago, it was reported that the Ukrainians had abandoned the village, but it appears that they still firmly control it. However, it shouldn't shock any of you that the Russians will soon try to seize the village once they begin their offensive on Velika Novosilka. There's also some Russian gains reported in this area here, south of Velika Novosilka, but not really anything too special. In UGLEDAR, or VULEDAR, depending on what you call it as, 40% of the town is now under Russian control. Russians control now roughly around half of the commie blocks. All of this is under firm Ukrainian control. Anything that isn't colored for either is in the gray zone, aka contested, or might already be under firm Russian control already. The Russians have confirmed by geolocation to control these commie blocks, but have yet to cross the street. There is also currently no confirmation about the control of these high-rises here, though I do believe it is very likely that the Russians do control them. They have also taken control parts of southern UGLEDAR, but not much, at least yet. But they're getting there. There is also conflicting reports that the Ukrainians within UGLEDAR have been completely encircled. But at this time, there is nothing to confirm that, and because of such reports not being confirmed, I will disregard them, at least for now, until geolocations are provided. Next up, we got the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians have reportedly taken control of Mykolaiivka, well, at least most of it. They haven't taken this part of Mykolaiivka yet, but it is now pretty much confirmed that Krasnoyar and Kryvyi are back under firm Russian control after the Ukrainians tried to counter there. And the Russians are also seeking to cut off this road between Gordivka and Myonograd. The Russians are now basically a single kilometer away from entering the city of Myonograd, which is still under Ukrainian control and is the neighboring city to the logistic hub of Pokrovsk. Now, personally, I think the Russians are not going to go for Myonograd yet. They're going to instead take whatever there is left of Gordivka, and then they will try to take the villages of Promin, Moskovske, Balahan, Mykolaiivka, and finally, Novyi Konomichny. They'll basically will try to cut off the road to Konstantinivka here. But I don't expect them to enter Myonograd just yet. But they will. And they're probably going to enter this city a lot sooner than Pokrovsk. They cannot really enter Pokrovsk unless they have SELYDOVE, or SELYDOVE, which I'll get to in a moment. Deep State has also confirmed that the Russians have also seized complete control over the landfills outside of Novogradivka and are also contesting for the villages of Lisovka and Suky Yar. There's also various reports, neutral mappers and pro-RU mappers are reporting that the Russians are working to encircle the town of SELYDOVE, or SELYDOVE, from the Ukrainians. Like, encircle them. Like, turn this whole town into another, like, Artyomovsk, Mariupol, or perhaps even UGLEDAR at this point, which is pretty much encircled now. As far as I know, The Ukrainians are now besieged from the east, mostly the south, except for this one road here, and also from the north. So the only proper way into SELYDOVE at this point is the path from Pokrovsk on the E50 road, and then through this road here, and then you're in the town. You could also go through these villages here, but it's probably not as reliable as going through Pokrovsk. But yeah, SELYDOVE is partially encircled, though not completely yet. And for them to complete the encirclement of SELYDOVE, they need to take control over this village of Sukurine. Pardon me if I pronounced it wrong, but the Russians now control a good chunk of this village. And once they're able to do this, they will not be only able to cut off SELYDOVE from more logistical routes of supply or also escape routes, but they will also take that next firm step in encircling the town of Giernik, which is also mostly still under Ukrainian control at this time. It's pretty much now besieged from the east and the north, but it's not besieged from the west and the southern directions. But again, just like SELYDOVE, it's partly encircled. In Toretsk, the city of Toretsk, the Russians are continuing to advance in the residential areas. And also, as you can see, the Russians have surprisingly taken control over half of downtown or the city center in Toretsk. And as far as I know, they now control basically around 50 to like 60% of the citadel, with the Ukrainians still holding on to these areas here. The Russians have also advanced in more low-rise residential areas here and here. So I will give Toretsk probably another month or two before it completely falls to Russia, because as soon as these last colony blocks here fall to Russia, it's going to be very difficult for the Ukrainians to hold on to Toretsk, because their defenses in this area are pretty much mid to mediocre. Like, they won't be able to defend Toretsk so easily. They also have to worry about this cauldron forming, because it will lead to a lot of their men trapped. There's no news from Chasiv Yar, so we can skip that direction. Nothing from Siversk. We can skip that direction. There is a bit of news coming from the Liman front, or like, I guess, northern Donetsk Oblast. Apparently the Russians are advancing again on the village of Tierney, which is like one of the places where they have struggled a lot throughout the last 2 years since the Ukrainian counteroffensive succeeded. Though again, it appears that they're going to try to take this village from the northern direction, not just from the east, but also from the northern direction. Syriac Maps has also now confirmed that Makivka is now under firm Russian control, and Andriivka has also reportedly fallen to Russia as well. So only around like 2 to 3 settlements, or 4, within the Lugansk Oblast are still under Ukrainian control. And then after that, it's GD for the Ukrainians in Lugansk Oblast, pretty much for good. There's also been reports that the Russians have been trying to cut the Kupiansk front into 2 just recently with a recent push, but they haven't been able to do so, at least yet. But as far as I know, it looks like they're going to advance south towards the village of Lazova before they then take another crack at it. But yeah, again, not a lot of activity going on here. In the Kharkiv direction, the aggregate plant, it's sort of a very complicated situation. Ukrainians reportedly have retaken control of the aggregate plant, but the problem, though, is the place has gotten bombed to smithereens, and it is so bad that nobody can really be there. Nobody. And based on the satellite imagery I just saw, and also video footage too, from like other sources, everything in northern Volchansk is pretty much gone. There's nothing left. Literally nothing but ruins. If anything, it's just a giant gray zone at this point. Though I think Ukrainians do have the upper hand in Volchansk, at least for now. In the Kursk direction, which is considered to be one of the bright spots for the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians are continuing to advance and retake back their territory from the Ukrainians. From Borky, the village here, they are now advancing towards Plikovo, which was taken during the initial phase of the incursion into Kursk Oblast, and it's very likely going to be taken back by the Russians very soon. Which makes an offensive on Sudzha by the Russians more and more possible. And speaking of Sudzha, the Russians have reportedly entered and are contesting right now for the village of Siverdilikovo. And once they're able to take this village back from the Ukrainians, pretty much everything north of here is going to get cut off. And yeah, there won't pretty much be anything that can supply the Ukrainians in the long run in the Sudzha front. In the Glushkovo direction, now this is one of the weirdest parts of the whole front line in all of Ukraine and Russia. Apparently the Ukrainians have taken control over the village of Visole, but a large chunk of it is in the gray zone, but it appears that Ukrainians are probably going to take control. At first they bypassed it, and then they tried to take it head on, but they failed to do so, and it resulted in a lot of losses for them. And now they tried again, and this time it looks like they're going to finally take the village. And they're closing in on Glushkovo because of that. Now, why would the Ukrainians advance here and instead of like in this area here? Well, it's because for logistics reasons. I feel like they're now going to focus on this area because they can actually sort of like hold on to it. I don't know. But that's at least what they're thinking. Because they don't have to cross the river. They can just simply stop at Glushkovo and just hold it as some like bargain chip at the negotiating table, if there even is a talk at the negotiating table. And they can also supply it from Sumy Oblast, so it doesn't really matter. Now, before I go today, President Zelensky visited my home country, the United States of America, to negotiate on a new deal in regards to aid to Ukraine, but also possibly getting the country into NATO. And spoiler alert, he has failed. Not only was he able to not get permission to join NATO, he also was not able to get permission to use long-range missiles to be shot into mainland Russia. Mission failed. And for these reasons, I certainly believe that the United States government knows very well that Ukraine, again, as I said in the last video, is cooked, and that the only reason why they're continuing to aid the country to begin with is because it makes literally the military-industrial complex a shit ton of money. And that's all they really care about. They don't care about who wins or loses the war as long as they're making money. It's that simple. War is a business. An ugly, corrupt business. That's literally what it is at the end of the day. So, that's going to do it for today's video. I'm sorry if it was super short. There wasn't really a lot to talk about. Maybe there will be more stuff to talk about next week. But until then, everybody, I hope all of you have a great week. And stay cool because we got an upcoming heat wave here. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. Take care. Peace out.